Love is the strength that binds people together. Words for scripture this morning are from Psalm 91, verses 1 to 11, and Isaiah 43, verses 1 to 5 from the Inclusive Bible. Let us listen to hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. You who dwell in the shelter of the Most High and pass the night in the shadow of Shaddai, say, God, my refuge and my mountain fortress, my God in whom I trust. For God says, I will rescue you from the snare and shield you from poisoned arrows. I will cover you with my pinions. Under my wings you shall take refuge. My faithfulness will shield you. You have no need to fear the prowlers of the night or the arrow that flies by day, the plague that lurks in the shadows, or the scourge that stands at noon. Though 1,000 fall at your left side and 10,000 at your right, it will never come near you. You will see it pass you by and witness the punishment of the corrupt with your own eyes. Because you have made me your refuge and have me as your stronghold, no evil will befall you, and no disaster will come near your tent. For I will command my angels to guard you wherever you go. From Isaiah. But now, Leah and Rachel, hear the word of God, the one who created you, the one who fastened you, Israel. Do not be afraid, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When seas, I will be with you. When you pass over the rivers, you will not drown. Walk through fire, and you will not be singed. Walk through flames, and you will not be burned. I am God, your God, the Holy One of Israel, your deliverer. I give Egypt as ransom for you, Nubia and Seba in exchange for you. You are more precious to me than Assyria. You are honored, and I love you. I will give people in exchange for you, whole nations in exchange for your life. Have no fear, for I am with you. I will bring your descendants from the east and gather them from the west. This is life-giving word for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Today I'm going to read a story, and we are all stories in our own way. The story has some things that might be difficult for us to understand, but it's only in learning about some of the stories from our Indigenous neighbors that we understand and can appreciate what they have gone through. Although it tells you some things that are really sad that happen to children, the story is still reaffirming. It's called I Am Not a Number. And we know in today's world, we're numbers in a lot of things, aren't we? Our bank accounts, our utility bills, whatever we do, we're a number. But this story is about resilience and about the love of family and children. Because I'm sure none of us can imagine having our children just snatched out of our arms and taken away somewhere else. It's quite amazing. This story is from Treaty Area number 10, which is in North Bay. The children went to a residential school in Spanish, Ontario, which is west of Sudbury. And it just happens, my last years in Elliott Lake, I was teaching in a school where 1/3 of the children came from the reservation that was near this residential school. I've actually even attended meetings there, and I met a lot of the parents and heard their stories too. But I don't think I had heard any of the stories that were quite as sad in a way as this one. This was written by a granddaughter about the year that her grandmother spent in residential school. The dark figure, backlit by the sun, filled the doorway of our home on Nipissing Reserve number 10. I'm here for the children, the shadowy giant said, pointing a long finger at me. You, how old? I shrank behind my mother. Here for the children? How old? He repeated. 8. The whisper floated from my mouth. The Indian agent marched into our house and approached my father. "You knew I would come, Ernest," he said. "The children are going with me to the residential school. They are wards of the government now. They belong to us, not Irene. She needs to be with her family." My mother wrapped her arms around me. "I won't let you take her." The man shrugged. "Give me all three, or you'll be fined or sent to jail." "We have no choice, Mary Ann," my father replied, sounding defeated. It was only a matter of time before they came for the children. Fear rose inside me, filling my throat. My beneath stood with their heads bowed low. Are they as scared as I am, I wondered? My other brothers and sisters, those too old and too young to be taken, huddled together, watching. My father pulled my two brothers and me into a semicircle before him. "This man will take you to live in a school far from here," he said in a soft, calm voice. "We don't want to let you go, but it's the law. We have to." "But why are you letting him take us?" I cried, pulling away. Father's hands trembled and tears pooled in his eyes. My loving father, chief of the community, strong and wise, turned away without answering. "Hurry up!" The Indian agent was becoming impatient. My mother gathered food into 3 small packets. "Something for their journey," she explained as the Indian agent tapped his watch. "Mom," I asked, "are you coming with us?" She shook her head. "But who will look after me?" I cried. "There will be teachers and nuns," my mother said. "You will learn many things at this school." Something in her voice, a quiver, a hesitation, made me doubt, to panic. "I don't want to leave you," I whispered. My mother pulled me up against her, and I buried my face in the folds of her dress, pressing her tighter until there was no air between us. I couldn't let go. The Indian agent opened the door and motioned for us to come. Mother pried my arms from around her back and kissed the top of my head. I grabbed the back of George's jacket and stumbled after him as he stepped toward the door. At least I had my brothers with me. I made a silent vow that we would stay together. As we walked into the sunlight toward the waiting bus, my mother ran forward. "Look after each other," she cried. "Never forget home or our ways. Never forget us. Never forget who you are." I turned one last time and gazed at her through blurry tears. How could I possibly forget my parents? How could I forget who I was? But then, how could I possibly guess what awaited me at the residential school? "Girls, follow me. Boys, you will be going to a separate building." A tall nun named Sister Mary stood at the entrance of the imposing brick building. My heart sank into my stomach as the boys were led away. No chance for goodbyes. The tiny spark of safety I had felt in being with my brothers flickered and died. I turned back to face Sister Mary, feeling more alone than ever. "My name is Irene Cucci," I told her. My voice was small, but I held my head high and clasped my hands together so that no one could see that they were shaking. Sister Mary's eyes narrowed to slits. "We don't use names here. All students are known by numbers. You are 759. "I am not a number. I am Irene Cucci, daughter of Ernest and Mary Ann Cucci. I will never forget who I am." I was hurried to the showers with the other girls who had arrived with me. We stood in a group as icy water pricked our bodies. Sister Mary hovered over us. "Make sure to scrub all the brown off." "She must like lighter-skinned girls better," someone next to me whispered. I stared at my dark arms while Sister Mary scrubbed them with foul-smelling soap. After I was dry, she handed me a plain gray dress, knitted stockings, and a pair of black leather shoes. Dressed in my new uniform, I was taken to a small room and ordered to sit on a low stool. The worst was still to come. Sister Mary wrapped the cape around my neck. "Now, let's get rid of that hair. Sit up straight," she ordered. Her sisters chewed through my long black hair, and I watched my locks fall in a pool around me. This meant much more to me than a haircut, though I could never explain that to Sister Mary. Back home, long hair was a source of pride. We cut it when we lost a loved one. Now it felt as if a part of me was dying with every strand that fell. Several days later, I sat with the other girls at a long wooden table, staring at the bowl of porridge in front of me. It was gray and lumpy and looked like the plaster my father had once used to fill some cracks in our wall. Next to the porridge was a piece of stale white bread. I thought of my mom's freshly baked loaves and homemade strawberry rhubarb jam. Back home, we never had much, but we were never hungry. Here, my stomach gurgled, calling out for food. "Eat," Sister Mary's stern voice cut into my thoughts. I forced some bitter, gritty mush. The smell nearly made me gag, but I remembered the warnings of the other girls. If you don't eat your meal at breakfast, they will serve it to you for lunch, and if you throw it up, you will have to eat the vomit. I raised spoonful after spoonful to my mouth and willed myself to keep it down. "I'm so hungry," the girl opposite me groaned. I broke off a piece of bread and leaned across the table. "Here," I said, "I don't want this." She smiled and reached for it gratefully. "Miigwech Gaijin," I whispered back. I didn't see Sister Mary until she was almost on top of me. Thwack! A big wooden spoon came down hard across my shoulders. I yelped in pain. "That's the devil's language," she shouted. "We don't speak it here." She grabbed my arm and hauled me up the stairs. Sister Mary's strides were long and fast, and I stumbled behind her, trying not to fall. I had seen other girls pulled along like this. Lessons. That's what the sisters called it when one of us needed reminding about the rules. I was terrified of what awaited me in the room at the end of the hallway. Sister Mary shoved her and turned away to fill a bedpan with hot coals from the stove. "Show me your hands," she said. "Please don't hurt me," I whispered. "Show me," she demanded. There was no escape. Slowly, I extended my arms straight out as Sister Mary lowered the hot bedpan onto my skin. I wanted to scream. Instead, I dug my teeth into my lower lip and squeezed my eyes shut as tightly as I could, counting the seconds until the sister lifted the pan. "That'll teach you to speak English here. You should be ashamed of yourself." With that, she walked away. I blew gently on the red welts that had bloomed down my arms. Ashamed? I wasn't ashamed of my language. I was proud of it. But everything I knew and loved about who I was and where I had come from was slowly being taken away. Mother's last words, "Never forget who you are," rang in my ears. "I'm Irene Cucci. I'm trying to remember," I whispered as tears streamed down my face. A couple of weeks later, I was in the chapel for early Mass, as I was every morning and twice on Sundays. "If you memorize the songs and pray a lot, you will go to heaven," the sisters told us. I didn't mind chapel. It was better than hauling firewood to feed the school's hungry furnace or mending worn clothes that were piled in the sewing room. Sister Elizabeth sat next to me and squeezed my hand. She was kinder than most of the nuns. Once, she gave me a piece of juicy steak and leftover potato when I was helping clear away the hearty meal that the sisters and teachers had eaten. I returned her smile and then searched the pews on the other side of the chapel, trying to find Ephraim and George. Because boys and girls were separated, chapel was the only place where I could see them. Ephraim looked my way. He was pale. "Are you okay?" I raised my eyes, silently asking him the question. He nodded slightly and then leaned forward in his seat as if he were asking about me. I closed my eyes in response. My arms were still tender, and even though the red sores had now turned pink, the memory of the punishment had not faded one bit. I knelt on the pew, troubled. Why are we treated so cruelly? Why must I change everything about myself? While I sang the songs and prayed out loud, I secretly begged God to let me return to my family. Days, weeks, and months slipped along, drearier than a never-ending storm. Up at 6 a.m., prayers, porridge, chores, studies. But the gloom of each day was better than the fear of punishment. I dreamed of being back on the reserve, where I could play with sisters and cousins. I wanted to hear the song of the meadowlarks in the grasslands. I yearned to spread my arms wide as if I was going to soar like a bird. I longed to fly away, but for me there was no escape. Just as I was beginning to believe that my time at the school would never end, an announcement was made that lifted my spirit. We were going home for the summer. Home. I hadn't said that word for so long. Would my house look the same? Would my parents know me? I had not heard from them all year, hadn't been allowed to write or receive letters. Out there, Sister Mary told us, we can't have you mixing with the outside world. But everyone knew. The nuns were afraid that our families would learn how we were being treated. When I saw my parents standing in front of my house, I knew that home was as it had always been. Mother rushed to greet us and nearly pulled me off my feet as she wrapped her arms around me. My father squeezed my cheeks. "I've thought about you every day," he whispered. "I never forgot you," I replied. "I never forgot who I am." Dad smiled and bent his forehead to touch mine. That evening, we sat down to a feast of meat pies and fried pickerel. Wanting us to take as much food as we liked, Mother urged us on, saying, "Gedan, gedan." I piled extra fish on my plate, realizing that I had not heard my Ojibwe language spoken in nearly a year. "Miigwech," I replied. The words I knew so well felt strange in my mouth. But at night, when I put my head upon my pillow, I was haunted by images of Sister Mary chasing me down a long hallway with a leather strap in her hand. I bolted awake and tried to stop my heart from pounding. Finally, I got out of bed and sat by the open window, where the familiar sound of water lapping up on the lakeshore calmed my breathing. But the nightmares did not end there. I knew that all too quickly the leaves would turn from green to bright red and orange, signaling the time when the living nightmare of that horrible place would be upon me. "Don't make me go back, please," I pleaded with my parents. I had slowly begun to tell them what had happened to us at the school. Dad's eyes darkened when I talked about Sister Mary's lessons, and Mother covered her ears and could not bear to listen. "I need to find a way to keep you here," my father said. "We must have a plan." I clenched my hands into tight fists. "Yes, we need a plan. But what?" "But if we disobey, what will they do to us?" Mom asked. "Let them do what they want," Dad said. "We won't send our children back to that place. We'll hide them, make sure the Indian agent can't find them." We all started to talk at once. We could hide upstairs in the bedrooms, but the Indian agent would search every corner to find us. We could hide behind the house, but we would be easily spotted back there. We could run to the lake and hide among the reeds, but no, they were not thick enough to conceal us. Then Dad suggested something. "You could hide in my shop." My father had a taxidermy shop on our land that was close enough to run to, yet separate from the house. Will it work? I wondered. Will my father's shop give us the protection we need? I looked at my brothers and at my parents. We nodded our heads in quiet agreement, a silent pact. We had a plan, and the summer was slipping away. When the dreaded day arrived, I was in the yard helping Mum hang laundry. The wind blew my hair around my face. My hair was growing. Soon it would reach down my back. "He's coming!" My older sister's shout cut through the air. I dropped the laundry basket and peered around the corner of the house. There he was, my kidnapper. The same Indian agent who had taken me away a year earlier was marching up the road, one determined step after another. Mom froze in place, looking as frightened as I felt. Then my father ran out the back door with Ephraim and George just ahead of him. "Irene," he grabbed my shoulders. "You and the boys go and hide in the shop." My feet would not move. "Don't let him take me away," I begged. "Run," my father ordered. He turned me around and shoved me forward. I tripped and then regained my footing. We had a plan, and it was time to put it into action. My brothers were sprinting across the property, and I set off too. We ran for our lives until we reached the shop, pushed the door open, and tumbled inside. "Hide!" I shouted. We dove behind some large crates, settling in where we wouldn't be seen. From where I hid, I could see through a window to the outside. Before long, I spied the Indian agent striding up the path with my father close behind. I placed my finger across my lips to warn George and Ephraim to be quiet. Then the door crashed open. "I know you're in here." I remembered the voice of the Indian agent. Sweat trickled down my back. "I sent the children to stay with my family farther north." It was my father's voice. "Don't know when they'll be back." I moved my head ever so slightly to try and see what was happening. The Indian agent, feet apart, arms crossed, was staring at my father. "You'd better not be lying, Ernest," he snarled. "You'll be in a lot of trouble if you don't send your kids back to school." Then my loving father, chief of the community, strong and wise, raised himself up to his full height. "Do whatever you want," he replied in a voice that was low and even. "Call the police. Have me arrested. You will never take my children away again." Seconds that felt like forever passed. My father stared at the Indian agent, and the agent glared back at him. I held my breath. Would the agent leave? Would we be discovered? I glanced over at Ephraim and George. Their eyes had grown wider than full moons. A lifetime, an eternity. Then, without another word, the Indian agent turned and left the shop. For a while, no one moved, uncertain that the danger had passed. But when my father slowly turned and stretched his arms wide, the three of us tumbled from our hiding places and flung ourselves into his embrace. I was laughing and crying at the same time, and shaking from head to toe. We were safe. I was Irene Cucci, daughter of Ernest and Mary Ann Cucci, and I was home. So that just shows us how important family is and how much love all families have, well, most families have for each other, and what parents will do to protect their children. In the indigenous way, cedar is very, very important. It's when you burn cedar and they smudge yourselves with it, it's like a prayer going up to heaven, and it is used in many of the ceremonies. So now the children are going to come along, and there's with a basket, and there's a piece of cedar tied with an orange ribbon in each basket, and you can take that as a reminder that we all have many things to learn about our indigenous people.